So over to you, Sunil.
Okay. In fact, it is a very privilege and a honor for me to introduce Mr. Sriram, Dr. Sriram. I was telling Dr. Sriram that TMA has a very long association with Dr. Sriram. When I joined TMA as a member 3-4 years back, I had the opportunity to hear Dr. Sriram over a topic on agile project management. And that was, I remember it was a face-to-face interaction. We were lucky to have Sriram at that point of time in Trivandrum, and we invited him, and he was kind enough to give a presentation then on agile project management, and it was well received. Basically, as a person who was working in infrastructure project, I found the principles very much. He was emulating many of the principles then from IT to project management, and I was feeling a very much synonymous with most of the concepts then told by Mr. Sriram. Again, last year also I got the opportunity to hear him in TMA on another topic, which is quite different. He brought light on some of the management wisdoms which we get from movies. That was also a very interesting session, but very much welcomed by our members and participants. So before introducing him, I want to tell, I wanted to just memorize everybody's memory about the past association. To just briefly tell about his CV, Dr. Rajagopalan founded the Agile Training Champions, focused on making a difference to professionals in their continuous learning, as well as high school students in applying project management and Agile principles earlier in their personal and professional lives. Agile training champion services include, his company's services include training, business consulting, and staff augmentation. Mr. Rajagopalan works as an enterprise agile evangelist and as a professional trainer at Inflectra Corporation, providing business process consultation as well as training on their Spira family of products. He manages PMO, proposition delivery, and operational excellence as a vice president and has delivered numerous projects and programs for many companies in many industries. He published his book. He is also an author of a book, Organized Common Sense, focusing on the importance of project and agile principles to everyone, and is focused on introducing these principles to high school students through his initiative. He received the prestigious PMI Eric Janet Excellence Award in 2017 and has published peer-reviewed scholarly journals, Scrum articles, and PM Network on topics related to middle management, middle management transformation through project management. He also facilitates at Northeastern University teaching leadership and project management classes. He has served in multiple leadership roles in PMI and and also served as executive board member of Boston University Agile Innovation Lab. As our president rightly said, he is having a lot of degrees to his credit and certifications to his credit. Dr. Rajagopalan, earlier, as our president said, he has a lot of certifications like PMP, PGMP, PMI, ACP, PMI, a lot of certification related to project management. I believe his experiences and lessons of management would be highly benefiting our members and students who had joined this session. Welcome, Mr. Sriram. I welcome you to address the start the presentation. The now dais is on for you.
It was a wonderful welcome. And again, thank you very much for welcoming me again into the program. I have a long association with Trivandrum Management Association. Like you mentioned, twice I have already presented. This will be the third time. And what's interesting today is primarily being able to present virtually using a technology-aided tool. We are really making the world a smaller place enabled by technology. I do request that people mute yourself if you're not talking, because in a technology-enabled presentation that could introduce interference and distraction. So we would like to make sure that that's kept to a minimum. And please use the chat window if you want to use, but I'm not going to be looking at the chat. If you have any contextual question that come up during a specific part in my presentation, either note it down or jot it, put it in the chat window so that I can review that and get back to you. And given the limited amount of time, sometimes we may not be able to answer all the questions. And if you put it in the chat window or compile them in some shape or form, I will be able to get back to you responding to those questions that I may not have an opportunity to respond. Okay, so those are some of the rules that I wanted to quickly mention to everybody so that we are able to continue moving forward. Right now, let's move forward with our presentation. So again, I'm not going to spend any more time on this particular slide because everybody know about me right now. But primarily, I want to focus on those purple related ideas. What I'm focusing on from volunteering, teaching, speaking, and writing, because ultimately I have a goal. The goal is to make world a better place by making a simple difference through each and every one of you. That's my ultimate goal, and that's why I founded my company Agile Training Champions, to make that difference. But coming back to our topic today, what is productivity? I talk about personal agility, manage for productivity. That's what I said. But let's start with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey said. Let's start with the end in mind, asking, what does productivity mean? And in a face-to-face interaction, I would have a discussion around this before I move forward. But in our virtual session, I do want to ask yourself, how do you define productivity? And this is not an immediate answer for you to respond, but think about it and say, how do I define productivity? Each and every one of you may have your own view of the world and so of productivity. Now, productivity, whenever I went and talked to a lot of people and asked this question, what's your definition of productivity? They always came back with this organizational definition. There was no the personal definition. It was always like, hey, we want to add more value to the output for every unit of labor and capital being used. Well, that's a standard book definition of what productivity means. And it is seen even in our normal life. Say for instance, you go to a store and you buy something and the shopkeeper gives you something extra. That's free, right? That's more output for the same amount of input use. You didn't pay extra money, you didn't do anything extra, but you just got something extra for the same same money that you spent. That's free, right? And that's also productivity to some extent. Why? Because they are trying to get you back into the program again, to the same store again. Other way of looking at productivity is same output, but for less amount of input used. So when you go and get those coupons, that basically says 5% off if you purchase by certain time frame, or 5% voucher, or whatever that is called, same output for the less amount of input used. You didn't get less amount of output, but you did not spend same amount of input as well. And this is normally seen even in our practical life, but we don't relate to them from that aspect of productivity at all. Now, if you take the same concepts and then extend it to your personal life, your own individual personal life, how would that define? Right? When you look at this, I came up with an idea. And productivity is, yes, about more, better, cheaper, and faster, and mainly being happier. And this is a coaching framework. We were talking about leadership framework, agility as a leadership framework. It is exactly that. The yes and is a coaching framework that says, yes, I want this and I want that. And people, when they don't understand this, they're going to come up with, yes, but. And that's not going to be really helpful, because we want to make sure that we want to do this, but that also. In other words, we want to do very good in our professional life, but also keep our family life in balance. We want to make sure that our employees and employers are very happy, our team members in work life is very happy, but not necessarily at the cost of our spouse, at the cost of our happiness to our children and our family members, right? Then you're not going to be happier. If you're not going to be happier, that's going to actually cascade through in your professional life as well. So we need to start with the basics. right? We need to start with the basics. But are we? As soon as I say this, people say, what? You want to be more productive at work? I'm already, doing so many things. And you still expect me to be happier? How can I ever convince my, spouse that I'm the best person? How can I ever convince my children that I'm their best, parent? Questions keeps coming up in their head, primarily because they are all feeling drowned, right? They are feeling completely drawn to the point that they feel like there is no other way. I had to keep doing the same thing over and over and over again because there is no other way. And that's the ideal definition of insanity. And I didn't say that. Einstein said that, doing the same thing repeatedly over and over and over again and expecting different results is the perfect definition of insanity, right? And so we need to move away from that. But how do we do that? So people started asking questions whenever I did this presentation before, and I asked questions like why people are not being productive or why people are not being happier. Things that came up were repeatedly, no time already. I'm so busy. Don't have any other time. And, today doesn't look good either. So come again another day, we'll figure it out. And these are the three things that kept coming repeatedly. And life, there is potential help away. There is potential help that is available using the proper means of what I'm trying to tell you here. Nevertheless, we needed to make sure that we do our own reality check, right? If we keep telling no time already, I'm very busy, today doesn't look good either, how are we going to continuously be better off, right? So I did a lot of management experiments. I went and talked to a number of different people, investigated, did some interviews, and started following through as to why people say these things. And it really struck me to do a fact or myth. Is it truly a fact or is it a myth that we are actually subjecting ourselves to? And one of the important thing is the no time consideration. When you look at a no time consideration, let's do a little quick check here, right? Time is the most precious resource that we have available. If there is no time, there is nothing else that we can do. And that's the one thing that we can never ever earn, right? You can earn money, but you can never earn time again, right? Time lost is always lost. So tell me who has more than 24 hours in any given day, right? And I'm sure when I do this presentation, some people who are in the Western countries will come back and say, when we change our daylight savings times, we have 25 hours in a single day. But if you take it on an average basis, you lose also 1 hour on a different day in the year. So you're still at 24 hours, right? Time management, therefore, is a myth. You don't manage time. There is only the same 24 hours that everybody wakes up to, and that's the end of it. So you cannot manage time to make it better. You can only manage the work that goes within the time. And that's what is fundamentally managing time, managing work so that you are more productive. And let's take a look at the Parkinson's law. This is one of the management laws that says that how work is getting organized. If you cannot manage time, you have to manage work to fit into the time. And we call this in agile principles as time boxing principles. What are we trying to do over here? Work expands to fit the time that is available. In other words, if you give 2 hours for a task, you will take the full 2 hours. For the same task, if you give 5 hours, you will still take the 5 hours. So that's the principle over here. Why is it taking more time for some people, whereas it is taking less time for some people? Assuming quality and everything is considered to be same here, the reason why this is happening is primarily because of lack of priority and focus and purpose. You don't know where you are going, you don't know why you are going, and so there is no proper priority. You choose whatever you want to do, and you are not necessarily accomplishing what you really want to accomplish here. So the second one is going to be, I am very busy already, right? This is also another question that people have to shuffle with. Now, when you look at this, show me what you are busy with. Show me a journal of everything that you are doing that actually is filling up your time. Remember, we already talked about time cannot be managed, only work can be managed. But if you are busy constantly with work, what kind of work you are actually filling your time with, your days with, then the constant busyness is a myth. Why? because multitasking is what we are trying to do. We are basically trying to say we want to do this, we want to do that, we want to do this. We are trying to manage multiple things without necessarily focusing our attention on any one thing. Even in the books in Indian libraries, you can go and hit this. There is a concept of power of now. Focus on one thing and getting it done. And we have talked about this repeatedly. Why do we say meditate? Because we want to make sure that we are bringing our energy as a focus on one thing, not necessarily million things, right? If you close your eyes for meditation, why so many movies is actually running in our head? Primarily because we are constantly multitasking. So being busy is becoming more like a social symbol, like a status symbol to say, well, I'm very busy. So more, if you're constantly busy, does not necessarily mean that you are always effective and productive. When you say I am busy, think about this. What you are telling the other person is that you value them less over what you are doing. Is that something that you want other person to know? And if the table gets turned around and they say they are busy, you are being valued less for them. Is that the message that we want to communicate back and forth? Right? When your child, for instance, asks for help in their homework, and you put away all the work for the child but focus on your work, what does the child hear? That I am not important, my work is more important. That's exactly what you are non-verbally communicating, right? It is better to show what you are working on. That means, hey, I have 5 things that I have to finish. I'm only working on these 3 things, and I have 2 more things to finish. And now you are asking this additional, time from me. I don't have the capacity or the energy after my 4 things are done to spend equal amount of time for you. So why don't we set aside some time for this so that we are able to give dedicated attention to that. And this has been talked so many times that being able to say no does not necessarily mean that you are saying never. You are only saying not now, which means you are aligning with the purposes that you want to focus on and what matters to you most, right? And this is already talked by another management principle called Carlson's law. This was promoted by a Swedish economist, and he basically came down and said all interrupted work will become less effective and will take more time. It was completed in a continuous manner. So if you did it focused on that one alone, you will take less amount of time to do this. But if you actually give contextual switching with multitasking, then you are going to take more time to do the same work. So the equation that we hear in our math principles, like if 10 people do the work in 5 hours, how many 20 people can do? It's not necessarily going to be that simple mathematical equation, because communication comes into the mix, context switching comes into the mix, and so it's not good to necessarily add up. What are we looking for? What are the other people looking for? Transparency on your commitment. What is your work looking like? What is your day looking like? What's your week looking like? If that is not there, how can other people ask you and feel offended? Or how can other people know that you don't have time for this? There is no transparency on commitment. We talk about this in Agile principles, like transparency for your backlog. And so let's move on to the next one, which is going to be today is bad. Right? That's another third excuse that people give. Today is bad, right? Now, if you don't have time today and you are busy already, tell me, how is tomorrow going to be any better? If you have taken for the fact that it is time and busy that you are constantly struggling with, it's a fact, because you are dealing with that on a daily basis. But the fact that you are dealing with it does not necessarily mean that it is actually true. How prepared will you be when you are going to be available for the future today, which is tomorrow, day after, whatever be the time, the future tomorrow, today? Whenever you are going to be making yourself available, are you truly going to give dedicated attention to this, undivided dedicated attention? No, because you are going to constantly be busy. You are somehow pushing this one in and not necessarily giving enough attention, right? Since our behavior drives most of what we are all feeling happy with, are we living the best today? If today is the only day that we are going to live, are we living the today to the extent we can? Again, management principles come to the rescue here. And this was a Leverett's law was proposed by actually a surgeon in France. And he called what is called a law of least effort, right? And what he started telling is people prefer to carry out tasks that give them immediate satisfaction. Like you want to see a movie. Why? Because you just want to take the time out from this. You want to eat this extra cup of whatever you are trying to eat. Why? Because you got an immediate satisfaction from the previous cup of whatever you had, and now you want the same thing more, right? So when we are doing the same repeatedly, those kind of things that immediately give us satisfaction, we are delaying other things that really require our attention, but we are not paying attention to that because we are so happy with what we really want to do. Robert Schuller, he wrote a book called Tough Times Never Last, but Tough People Do. And he said in that book, if you really want to get some important work to be done, give it to a busy person, because that person knows the value of time to get the work done. Now that really integrates all these principles here in terms of how they are all applicable in today's life. And when we are actually focusing on this, we are picking satisfaction and then happiness, right? Now, so I tried all these experiments at home and did this. So my home started with agile home. Like, what's a successful definition of today? What's our successful today? We started with that, and people started writing things like, my week is going to be this, you agile home. So the menu is rightly available. At the end of Saturday, we did our backlog grooming and sprint planning and said, like, this is what we are going to do. So everything is pretty clear. There is no more expectations on my wife or myself or anybody that supported us to say, okay, we have to do something else today, something else. No, it's clear. The backlog is pretty much ready here. Agile kitchen, right? And then I actually had my wife actually label each and every cupboard with what's inside them, so that I'm not constantly flipping. What am I doing? I'm applying the concepts of lean to avoid wasting time. If I need to cook something, if I need to grab something, I need to know where they are. I'm not going to keep asking you suddenly, because waiting on you is going to create downtime for me, right? We need to avoid that. We applied all these principles at home and see whether they really had any ground on this. And I also applied this outside of my work and outside of my home. I was a theatrical actor, and we did one show in the Chicago Tamil Changam, where we did some big play of 67, 50, 70 people or just on the stage. And I applied agility outside of software development from the theatrical play as a case study. What are my main observations from here? My main observation is the Scrum, which is one of the most famous agile lean approach. Life changed too fast for Scrum to apply in my daily life. You cannot say, this is my 2-week period, and this 2-week period I cannot do anything else. I'm not going to do that. And besides, in Scrum, you have a team to work with. In personal way of me looking at things, I'm the only person. I have myself, and Sriram, and that's pretty much it. And Kanban is another lean approach, and that helped with work in progress limits. That's called WIP. And it basically says, like, I focus on only one thing at a time. That's good, but what is the one thing I should really focus on? You pick the next card that's going to be available to start working on, but is the next card the thing that really have to be applicable to you? So my main observations was they were really helpful, but they were actually lacking in a couple of areas where I really wanted some help. But when I went back, it all boiled down to productivity is from happiness. It's not about doing more, better, cheaper, and faster. It's also about happiness, right? Being happy, because if you're not happy, none of those other things are going to be relevant and applicable, correct? And so productivity and focus on purpose, which I talked about very first. The next one is going to be the transparency on commitment. And the third one is big satisfaction and happiness. How can I actually have these things answered? And that's where my choice became very clear about personal agility. And what is personal agility? right? At the core, it is managing for maximum impact. What does it mean? So we all have certain demand in our life, and we all know that we have only so much capacity, which means out of the 24 hours, you are sleeping for 8 hours, you are doing many other things for another 8 hours, and you have work for another 8 hours. So you have limited capacity, you can do everything that you want to do. And so within that capacity, you really need to focus on what really matters to you, what is ultimately required of you, so that you are happy and people around you are happy. In order for the surround system to work in an acoustical environment, first of all, the speaker has to work. There's no point in looking at the subwoofer if the speaker itself is not functioning. And so Peter Stevenson is the founder and thinker behind this concept of personal agility. And he came up with the notion of what are some of the 4 things that you have to ask. What is important to you? In other words, it's important to you, you alone, not necessarily everybody else, because you need to make sure that you are happy before people around you are going to be happy, because happiness is contagious. What is then urgent? Things that actually take your time away but still needs to be done. What to accomplish from that particular list. And finally, what are you going to do today? It's very easy to focus on these things this way. Now, it's very important for you to actually understand knowing your target. Several years back, my mother basically was asked to do a presentation for geometry in her high school environment, right? And not even high school, middle school environment. And she asked, like, okay, how can I demonstrate the principles of geometry in a poster session? So I came up with the concept of what about the impact of 1 degree? So if a ship has to travel from one destination and to the end, that green line, it's very good. Now, if you only change it by 1 degree right from the start, you are completely missing the mark. Over a long period of time, you are missing the mark. And that's exactly how I define happiness too. If you stayed on the course, things would be fine. But things are not going to be very easy. You are obviously going to be changed by life's forces. So what are some of the things that you really have to know? First, you need to know where you are going. If not, we have to have some retrospective inquiry. Second, you need to recognize that life is not a scripted solution. You need to be ready for those forces that will change your direction. Third, you need to know some course correction tools that are available from project management and agile principles to align yourselves repeatedly. Finally, you need to know who will support you along your journey. If these things are not there, you are never going to be able to get to your target very clearly, or you will reach a target where you are not happy. And now you scratch your head, why am I not happy? Now, there are 6 questions and one simple event that personal agility actually promotes, and that's going to be this way, right? What really matters to me? You need to have that question asked yourself, right? Then what did I do last week? A lot of times people don't know what it is. And one thing that I often do, ask people to do, is to create a journal for work that they did last week. Go back and, it's a little fresh in your mind, and take a look at what you did last week. So when you take a look at everything that you did last week, it will kind of give you an indication of where your time is getting spent. Right? Now, based upon that, you can go and say, what could I do this week? If this is what my pattern is, what could I do this week? Now, it's an opportunity for you to engage in a dialogue with yourself and say, is this really where I want to spend my time? If it is, make course corrections. If not, try to say, okay, we are going to emulate this. Now, from this list, what is important, urgent, or makes you happy? And if you are not dividing your time equally around elements of what's important and what makes you happy, you will continuously, repeatedly do whatever is expected of you, but you are continuously moving away from that happiness. And then what else can I get done? And finally, who can help? One of the important leadership principles is knowing when to need help and asking for it correctly. Now, this is what defines you, who you are, what you did, and what stuff you need to get done so that you are getting closer and closer to the reality. And you do this by celebrating with others and allowing them to actually help you choose the right thing and move forward, right? Now, Sriram, this is all very good. I found my peace with this, and I wanted to actually take it to the next step, and start telling how to apply this in my own life. Right now, when you look at my life, I come with the concept of ikigai, which is a Japanese principle that talked about what makes you happy. In other words, what makes you wake up the following day with so much excitement and contribute to the fullest. Some people are basically looking at their profession immediately. Everybody wants to start getting a job and study more and things like that, because profession is what is making you pay your bills. Then the other one is using those particular elements of what you are skilled at. Some people will actually do some freelancing, which is the vocation, right? The world needs some additional work, some additional things, but sometimes that's getting paid for. So you don't necessarily focus on the actual societal value, but you are still looking for, okay, I get some extra money. And if you take it a few additional steps above, it's called passion. What you're good at, because you are good at consulting, you are good at teaching, you are good at software development or website or whatever be it. You are creating a passion for it, and as a result of that passion, you are trying to do more of those good things. I'm volunteering somewhere, I'm trying to help other things, I'm writing my blog, so what are we all doing here as TMA principals here? The Trivandrum Management Association is bringing all of us together because we are passionate about what we are trying to do here. And then we are moving into the mission. At the end of the day, what kind of topics to choose? How do we actually promote value? How do we make sure that our membership is good? How do we make sure that we serve a societal cause that's much beyond us? That's going to be what the world needs and the mission. Right? This is the definition of how Ikigai is formed. And the more you are focused on the passion, mission, profession, and vocation, the more you are going to be a full, complete circle. So I took this and said, okay, how does this apply to me? So profession is my paid work. I do consulting and I teach. That became my one of my charters. The next one is going to be vocation. It's going to be where I'm spending more and more time on volunteering and research. Nobody paid for me to publish all those extra articles. Nobody paid for me to actually spend my time to work on those experiments and publish those frameworks. It's constantly making sure that the world is a better place in any shape or form, making a difference. And then passion. Well, I started looking into both these things and say, well, the people need some cost effective solutions for continuously improving themselves, looking for different ways of doing things, and things of that nature. So that's when I started doing training, coaching, speaking, and writing, these things that I'm actually doing as part of my own business here. And finally, the mission. My mission is to actually make sure that me and my family are safe and financially stable, but at the same time professional branding around the product leadership. So what are you known for in the world? So I cannot say what that is going to be, so I involve in a coaching framework to actually create that professional branding for people that work with me. And finally, the plot leadership, the projecting leaders of tomorrow, which is going to be how I can actually make sure that the younger generation in high school and middle school are able to understand the principles of project management and agility, so that they are able to manage themselves much better. Because in schools, we are not necessarily teaching all those elements of anger management, stress management, priority management, stakeholder management. We're not teaching these principles. We are telling them about managing time, and we know that it's a myth. Right? So what really mattered to me and the forces map. So I started putting all these things in Trello for me. So I created certain labels. So what really matters to me was my paid work, my business, my family, and my volunteer work. Because if you take any one of those things away, I will not become a full circle. Right? So I created this particular element, like, okay, what are some of the things that I have to do, the business that I am trying to do to make the world a better place, and family that I need to take care of, including me. The last time I checked, family included me also. The volunteer work that I'm continuously trying to do. And when you do this, I need to come up with some mechanisms of what forces will actually take my journey in different directions. So that's when I started telling what's most important to me, what is important, what's kind of makes me happy, because even whether it is important or not, I need to do this. Some of those reminders that I have to make sure that I'm getting things done. So what are some of those urgent things that I did not plan for, but that suddenly were thrown under my radar screen? So what are some of those forces that is changing me? Right? So I put all these things in Trello and I started recording them. Trello is just one tool. I'm not promoting Trello. I'm just telling like it's one tool where I started recording everything, because it was becoming more and more and more visible, because there was an electronic digital way of recording things here, right? And so as soon as I finished everything here, I started moving the cards into the den, and people began to see. And I attached my son's picture, my wife's picture, and these things, it became very personable to them, right? So they became very understanding of what my role is and what are my work commitments, what are my things that I am currently working on. So there is more transparency. So they allowed me to inspect and adapt. It allowed them to inspect and adapt themselves too. And so what am I creating here? The breadcrumbs. These are my breadcrumbs as to how is my time being spent and how much time I'm spending on each and every one of those dimensions. And personal agility comes up with additional tools as well. And this is when I started looking at the summary of breadcrumbs. So I looked at my summary of breadcrumbs for 3 months that I'm trying to do over here. Family, business, my paid work, and my volunteer work. When I look at all the different cards or tasks that I completed and I converted them into a percentage, I felt like this is the amount of time I'm spending towards all my things that are important to me. So yes, I'm happy. And is this the best I can do? So when I started plotting them around using simple pivot charts analysis, am I spending where I'm supposed to be spending my time? Look here. I said family is very important to me. I said my business is very important to me. But if you look at this, that's not where I'm spending my time. That's not where I'm spending my time. So less and less time I'm spending in these dimensions, living in the artificial reality that I'm really happy. And I hope I got everyone's attention here. This is very critical here. We are at a critical juncture here. So once I started doing this, I started moving into what is called an alignment campus that personal agility provides. And personal agility, I started mapping into these things. What are some of those things? So this is more like the compass that people use in the ship to navigate around. And so I started putting things in that main direction. So I really want to go in the family direction, and things that I can move away a little bit here are paid work and the business work. And then, things that are taking me more and more and more away from what my primary goals are. So, that's how compass is designed, right? So when you look at this particular thing, the amount of time that I should be spending is like this. More time on family, some more time on the business aspects, and then only on the paid consulting work, and then on the actual volunteer work. This is how it should be spent, right? Now that looks more like the number 2, the big 2. This is where the direction should align here for me. It will align differently for different people, but this is how I should be spending my time. But when I looked at this and mapped what my contributions was, it looked like this. The vectors were not long enough for me. They were all very, very short. And the amount of time that I spent looked like this. This is not the perfect 2. And as I started, getting a little better, I started seeing, something different. And I started seeing something more different. Is this the perfect 2 that I should live? So I started investigating myself, go deeper into myself and say, okay, what am I doing here, which is taking time away from what really matters to me? So understand the forces that is taking the time away from me. When I did this, I came up with some earth-revealing knowledge. First of all, understand where my family wants the support. Not what I think I want to support my family with, but what do they want that I can provide. So putting everything from other people's perspective, I started feeling like, oh, if I do this, I'll be happy. But that's not necessarily making family happy. The family is not necessarily happy primarily because they, I did not do what they wanted me to do. Helping the son with the homework, not necessarily always bringing money to the table. The next one is establish service partnerships. Within my business, I started doing everything myself. And I said, I'm not going to do everything myself. I'm going to work with partnership arrangements so that I can do this. Now I have partnered with, several different organizations at this point to, make available what I'm giving you available. If you go to my website, you are seeing hundreds of courses. I could not completely deliver all those hundreds of courses myself, but now I have a partner to actually make it and bring it available at a level. My power comes in that negotiation to actually make things available for you. Volunteer on consulting engagement. I don't want to volunteer on every little thing. Yes, I have time for it, I am passionate about it, but there are other people that I can actually coach to do those things. But whereas I can put my energy and time on things that really mattered, which means I am bringing my two to the perfect two that I really want. And in order for me to do that, I need to know who are all the people that I should be working with. And that's another tool that is called Stakeholder Canvas. And yes, we have known stakeholder maps, stakeholder registers, many other tools, stakeholder engagement assessment metrics. We have seen all those things, but this is a better tool for me, primarily because it started with what really matters to me. Right there you are starting to think like what really matters, and this is labeled in a particular order, that the numbers 1 2 3 4 is labeled in a particular order, and logically speaking people will expect them either in a row or a column format, but 8 starts right here because it kind of folds. So yes, this is a start, and also is a means for checking progress. Then who is the customer and who is enabling or disabling me, whether it is your professional work or whether it is your personal stuff. Who is my customer and who is supporting me? And finally, how do I get this to the next step? What are the things that I should really understand from a delivery perspective as well as from an impact perspective? And then comes the challenges, constraints, and unknown uncertainties, right? And then what demotivates you in your progress? What pulls you down? And then what is the success criteria? What kinds of support you want from different people at different points in time? What do you expect to see things before meeting for the next time? Now that brings everything to a very good closure. And if you look at this, some simple principles of definition of scopes, risk, quality, communication, stakeholder, everything is coming into the play right over here. Now, personal agility is a system, right? It puts me as a captain of the ship because ultimately I am driving where I need to go and how I go there, right? It's my ship, it's my journey, and I'm actually becoming that particular person. And I use the 6 powerful questions repeatedly to come up with how I can actually move forward in the right direction, right? Align myself. And simple coaching framework. If you take the same thing and apply it in your employment, in your professional work, as to how you actually make sure that your employees are on board with whatever you are trying to say, how they are managing themselves so that you are able to increase productivity for them, the more they are able to do that, the more time is relieved for you to manage bigger and better things. And it gives you a collection of simple tools that you can use. So I basically gave you, a set of simple tools: the priorities map, the forces map, the breadcrumbs, and alignment, and stakeholder canvas. Right? It's very simple things. It's not necessarily 50 million things, but simple 4 or 5 different important tools that you can use with. Personal agility is all over the world. It's not just US alone, or it's been practiced already in several parts of North America, in Canada. It's applicable in a number of places in Europe, India, Sri Lanka, Australia, and this concept is now getting spread like a wildfire. Many people are doing this. And again, Personal Agility Institute came up with its own definition of certifications. Like, they have their own certifications of how to be a recognized practitioner, ambassador, a coach, and trainer as well. So there is more to come on these elements, but it's a very powerful system of tools that's actually bringing things back to how you can manage what really matters to you. When you really manage what really matters to you, your productivity is going up. So the things that I want to leave you with is what's shaping your world today. What are your priorities? Now, I don't immediately start answering questions like this. This is thoughtful questions for you to, reflect and see how you can make a difference, right? What are your priorities? What forces is supporting or distracting you in your progress? And how can you bring alignment to what matters to you? And finally, who are all the people you are working with to make sure that they support your journey in what really matters to you? Now, this is what I'm trying to leave you with as a thought. And if you have any questions, please contact me at this point. Thank you to everyone.
And thank you very much. Thank you very much. Am I audible? Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, you are very audible. Yes.
Yeah, it's a fantastic presentation. The interruption is not a matter. That was not came up. Actually, Dr. Sriram, it is a very wonderful presentation and it is an eye opener for us. We thought that we all thought that this is only another management jargon, which or concept which came up recently, but it is not like that. We understand that it is the requirement of the time. So we everybody understand and appreciate it. And now, since the time is limited, I am very quickly going to our audience, our participants. They can write their comments, if any, in the chat box. Right now, I got one comment that is about one aerospace project. Okay, these the projects having long gestation period, and he is want to know, Mr. Francis want to know that how the agile principles can be applied in such projects having long gestation period.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. This is a very good question and a very timely question, as well. Although, Mr. Francis, you are mentioning about aerospace background, this applies to a number of other industries as well. Like, for instance, the pharmaceutical background, where people are developing drugs. I personally have worked in aeronautical space, where we have to deliver messages to different parts of the world. And from my experience on these areas of working in pharmaceutical, to some extent in the aeronautical space and healthcare space and things like that, I can tell you this. Research projects do have a goal. When you think of research, the first thing you have to think is there is an hypothesis. People don't work on things, go around and spend 10 years there. Right there, they're saying like, okay, this is our R&D and we want to have a proof of concept, and in order for me to do this proof of concept, they come up with statistical hypothesis and null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis, and you are doing some data collection, you are verifying whether it is working, and when things are working, you are moving into the next stage as to how to move to the next stage of phase 2 and phase 3. Or if it's not working, you are trying to refine it so that you can make some variable changes and do some factor analysis and see how we can move forward into the next thing. So when you look at the reliability, the validity, the everything else, it's agile. Every hypothesis is simply nothing but a small iteration, and you are putting all your energy only into that particular focus, and once that hypothesis is proven, you are moving into the next stage of what lessons you learn from that hypothesis. We can make people changes, process changes, technology changes, whatever it is, organizational changes, and you are moving into this. This is how we are actually creating a vaccine right now from phase 1, when we are studying toxicology and pharmacology, and then the first human dose, and then you are moving into the FDA or clinical submission. Same process applies over here in the aeronautical space as well. It just differs on how we are changing our mindset around it rather than yielding to it. I hope I was able to answer that, Francis, to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Any
Sure.
other questions?
I think there
Hello.
is another question here about, is an aggregator model and negotiation the best way forward for the personal agility system as a leader or CEO of the firm? I'm not too sure about what you meant here as an aggregation model, but I can understand from a negotiation perspective. So a personal agility system is applicable for everybody. If it applies for an individual, CEO, as far as I know, is also an individual, right? Any senior member of the leadership committee is also still an individual. So it's a means by which they understand what really matters to them. So as a CEO, what really matters to them is making sure that the company is on a profitable and stable ground, and that is what is going to really matters to them. And who are the people that CEO is going to bring along with that journey? The senior directors or the vice presidents or the senior vice presidents or whatever that immediate middle management group is. You need to convince them that what you are trying to do is really important for the long-term health of the company. And once you have convinced other people, the middle management layer, they are on the charter to actually move forward. So a good leader is also a servant leader, making sure that you are giving the transformational experience to those people so that the life can continue to move on even without you being present. Apple didn't stop just because Steve Jobs passed away. Microsoft didn't stop just because Bill Gates is no longer the CEO. things will continue to move forward. But a new leadership will come with a new mantra, a new idea of doing things, but the journey should go on. The journey should continue. So how you are actually defining what really matters to that particular snapshot in time, and how you are positioning people so that you are lobbying them for support and bringing that inspiration. You don't want to compromise your own happiness too. So yes, this model will definitely apply, because it is not associated with the title of who you are, or your seniority, your experience level, or things like that.
My question regarding the pharmaceutical, you have talked about the pharmaceutical now in that area. That's now there are unforeseen changes happening in the world due to this COVID and all. But then now the pharmaceutical, with my experience, I know that I'm in the pharmaceutical industry for many years. So I know that the pharmaceutical is divided into three categories: area, the pharma, biopharma, and lab. In which area this personal agility is more powerful and more effective, sir? Because you have talked about a very like an experienced guy, you know that it is very well about pharmaceutical industry. In which area it is applicable, sir? Personal agility, pharma, biopharma, or in the laboratory side?
It is applicable on all areas. It is about people. Personal agility is for the individual. It's for you and me. It's not associated with any specific industry itself. Because when you look at the actual things about stakeholder, what really matters to me, family, the forces that change, the importance, the urgency, and things like that, none of those things is associated with any specific industry itself. So it's all about wherever people are, this personal agility system will apply. So it can apply in the clinical model. I have already seen people that are using it in the clinical setting. I have already applied it in the personal, at the pharmaceutical level. I've talked to people at the biopharma level as well. So, it applies to wherever there are people who are willing to give a different mindset change. Very good, very good. And there was a comment here about, tell me what your book is here. So yes, my book is Organized Common Sense, and it is written at a level where as high school student can actually understand how project management principles and agility applies. So I take the metaphor of a journey through the train map. As you are going through a train ride, you stop at different stations, and between each and every station, I'm actually trying to say, okay, you have now built the concept of scope, you have now built the concept of time, you have now built the concept of stakeholders, quality, risk. So one by one, I am trying to build this along the journey. So it's more like a story that travels with you. While you are traveling with me in the journey, I'm also trying to give you things like, okay, what is the things that you really matter, the 6 important fronts that you should have. This is the 5W and 1H principle. What is Socratic thinking? How do you actually define what is important to you from assignment perspective so that you can do it? So things of that nature. But I also, towards the end, give you discussion questions for people. That could be for students. It could be for parents who are not necessarily project managers or agilists. Our parents are the biggest ones. So they have to understand what agility and project management means. They do it, they practice it, but they don't know what it is. And so I'm trying to give some thought process for the parents to understand how they know this, so that they can better equip their children for better things in life. And at the same time, I'm also talking to teachers and educators about how these principles can be brought into the classroom. So, talk about the risk of losing points and the quality expectations, rather than here's an assignment, go and do it. Right? So more about that. And at the same time, I'm also talking to the business units who are not necessarily the PMO, program management office, or project office. For those people, like a quality team or an IT team or a compliance or a legal team or a scientist team, for those members, how they can actually take these principles and apply in their own business unit as well. So it's a very powerful book. I strongly recommend that people go ahead and take this. And this book is also the foundation for my project leadership of tomorrow. And this is, I recommend that you go to the agiletrainingchampions.com. There is a plot, component to this. If you go there and look at it, you will see how people are actually talking about this? What are some of the things that the 21st century skills people are requiring in today's children? More and more testimonials and, more courses that I'm trying to teach as well there. And some of these things that I'm talking here, I have already introduced to the younger children. The 8th grade, 9th grade children are actually getting exposed to things that I'm talking right over here. So the more we better equip everybody else around us, the better. I request that you go and take a look at this. And the courses that I have available, and the initiatives that I'm really trying to support. And if you have more questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. I believe I have answered all the questions here, but anything else? Thank you very much, Mr. George. I really appreciate that. I value the partnership with TMA very important, because it helps me influence the greater minds. And specifically, I would like to thank Mukesh and Revati, who have been really instrumental in helping me connect again this year and try to make sure that we are able to provide what I am able to provide today. And apologies for whatever happened in the presentation, but I'll do my best to make sure that these things are not happening next time. But it was outside of my control.
Any more questions? Mr. Joseph Varghese and Mr. Najib has commented that they got a very eye-opening type of lecture today. Any more comments, please? Any more questions? If not, I will come to my responsibility to say what are thanks. Okay, sir. This was a very tough time. I know that Mr. Sriram has spent a very quality time in his life for us, for the TMA members and our listeners, to get induction to a particular topic, which is more people-centric. That is what we consider it is a more people-centric, rather than connected to any other factors of finance or missions or something. So there are a lot of legislative framework or legislative mindset also has to be created among the policymakers to make that the agile principles has to thrive in modern organization. As Mr. Francis also pointed out, there are big organizations which was laying their foundation on very strong ethos that was created over. But what we propagate is a people-centric approach. And recently, Bill Gates has been said that the agility is the success mantra, and we have to constantly think, rethink, reinvent, like that, to make the system to run. Especially in this troubled time, this is a very valid topic, and we are very much grateful to Mr. Sriram, because last year also you gave us a very nice lecture on a very important topic. And this year also you found some time. So we very much value the relation with you. The TMA is very much indebted to you, Mr. Sriram Rajagopalan, for spending this time and also create awareness about these agility-related aspects, a revolution taking place in the era of this pandemic, especially in this era of pandemic, where people are working from different locations, and to create a new initiative. So TMA, pray for your success in your path for creating value to the thinking and attitude of the people in future also. And on behalf of the TMA team, and I thank you very much for the wonderful presentation and for the time you spent for us, sir. I also thank our president, my colleagues in TMA for spending their time, and I hope that we all have learned better, more learned people at the end of the day. Thank you, sir.